Okay. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Hi there. I'm waiting for you all to confirm that you all can hear me. Then I can start the stream. Okay, good. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Luna Early. Today, my stream today is gonna be about the culture of indigenous people and how it affect the communism, Marxism-Leninism. It's gonna be very interesting. And today, I am welcoming our guests. Oh, wait a minute, I forgot to introduce myself. Hi, I'm Luna. I'm a Vietnamese communist living in Vietnam. Okay, let's welcome our guest today. First, let's say it's Saber. Hello there. Oh, our correct Saber is now not ready yet, but okay.
Okay, I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh my god, wait, give me a second. I'm echoing somewhere.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can close this. Okay. Hello?
Good. No echo anymore.
Nice.
Oh no, I still
All right,
hear,
yeah.
Wait, I still hear some echo.
Wait, give me 1 second. Let me see if I can quickly switch. How about now?
Hello.
Hello?
Still some echo. Still, I can hear my own voice.
Give me 2 minutes. Let me see if I can quickly refresh.
Okay.
The stream.
Okay, let's welcome Silver Spook.
Hey everybody, I'm Silver Spook. Just do an introduction.
Yep.
Okay. Hey everybody, aloha. Aloha. I am Silver Spook, a native Hawaiian activist, defender of our sacred mountain Mauna Kea here on the Big Island of Hawaii under the ongoing illegal occupation of the United States Empire for the last 120 plus years. That is the Kanaka Maoli flag. There is another flag. This I don't have it up there right now because it causes a lot of questions. This is the official Hawaiian nation flag for now. There's reasons why there's a Union Jack in it, but that's the Kanaka Maoli flag. And I am a Hawaiian activist, speak out from a left perspective. Generally speaking, I'm also I make games, indie cyberpunk adventure games, in particular Neofeud, like the one on the wall there, which is an anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, anti-racist cyberpunk game where you play a social worker for homeless sentient machines and discarded half-human animal hybrids, where neo-feudal trillionaires sit floating above in palaces and golden, not unlike Hawaii, where they have billionaires living on the hills above where I live, which is the ghettos where the tour buses don't take you, which is a game about my life as a social worker, as a STEM teacher, growing up in an impoverished ghetto. And so a lot of what I do is I make games about my experiences under racialized capitalism, colonialism, having my language banned and our culture banned as a Native Hawaiian. And then also I do education. Some people call it ranting, but I'm not supposed to call it that. It's high decibel, very passionate, high intensity education on cameras and microphones, not ranting. And so that's what I do on my channel, YouTube, and on Twitch. And I think Holly's dropping a lot of links. Holly is my partner as a member of the Silver Spook Hui, which I learned from Luna, is a Hawaiian, Chinese, Vietnamese, and Maori, which is Indigenous New Zealand word, which means a worker cooperative for us and also people working together. So Holly, myself, and my friend Positive Synergy and our two kids are the Silver Spook Hui, where we hui together on the Aina, the land. My friend Positive Synergy is another native Hawaiian. He's currently actually working on building more of the Silver Spook cooperative housing to help house more Hawaiians and anyone else. We don't discriminate, as Hawaiians never have. We had full Chinese and African citizens when America had Black and Chinese slaves, and Canada did too. Anyway, so that's who I am, and that's what we do here. I'm just trying to delay a little bit so hopefully Saber can get things working. But yeah.
Now let's welcome Team The Conquest of Dread to the show.
Hey,
Hi, team.
Hey, how's it going? Is my volume all right?
Yeah, totally
Yeah.
fine.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool. Sweet. Yeah, I wasn't sure. Hey, how's it going? I'm Tim. I make videos on YouTube and stream as Conquest of Dread. I'm down in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Yeah, I'm Pākehā and Māori content creator. I do a little bit of everything here and there. And by day, I'm a tattoo artist. And yeah, that's it. I don't have one of our Maori flags. There's two. I don't have either of them to show like I'm spooked it. But yeah.
Tali's always got one. It's the red with the wave shape.
Yeah,
right?
Tino Rangatira. That's like the kind of the flag for Maori sovereignty and like resistance. But there's another one, the United Tribes flag, which was one that all the tribes agreed would be, the flag for the country, all the tribes together. And then, and then a little while later, the British kind of went, oh, okay, actually, no, this is a new flag. And this settled on the one that we currently have. But but no, the United Tribes flag, we call it tikara. You see it a lot at like protests and stuff. It's kind of like when the treaty was signed, it was supposed to guarantee that there would be two governments kind of working together, the Pākehā like settler government and the Maori government, and so a lot of people use the United Tribes flag as a symbol for, specifically the kind of independent Maori government. But yeah, anyway, that's a little tangent there.
That's history.
Okay, thank you so much, and let's welcome Saber to our stream today. Hello.
How is it now?
Yeah, great.
Cool.
No,
All right.
good.
It isn't a stream without at least one technical difficulty, so
Oh, I understand that
yeah.
completely. Completely.
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for bringing me on to the show. I make Afrofuturist video essays, typically from a Pan-Africanist perspective. The past few projects that I've been working on have involved essentially trying to tie in a variety of Afrofuturist novels with things that are happening in the real world or things that have happened in the past. So, for example, several months ago, I made a video essay about Walter Rodney and the underdevelopment of Africa, and I tied that into a novel called The Deep, which goes into the importance of history. And what's interesting about that book is that it takes the sort of tragic events that, for example, occurred during the transatlantic slave trade, involving African women being thrown overboard who were pregnant and stuff like that, and essentially takes that idea and imagines a future whereby the offsprings were survived and were transformed into mermaids who lived underwater, and they have this very interesting way of interpreting. Oh wait, can you hear me?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So that's the book, The Deep, which is a great book, and I highly recommend it. I've also recently also made a video about a few situations in the UK in regards to the Windrush scandal that had happened that started in the 50s after World War II, and how many Caribbean people and African people had come to the UK to help to rebuild a nation after the war, and I also spoke about the trial of the Mangrove Nine, which involved the British Black Panthers, who were heavily inspired by the Black Panthers in the UK. So that's about it for me for now. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for being here. Now, our very last Twin Rabbit that just joined us today. Let's welcome Twin Rabbit. Hi.
Can you hear me?
Can you can you
Yes.
speak louder a little bit?
Yeah, let me turn up the gain a little bit. Sorry, my soundboard
Okay.
is,
Okay, great now.
how's that?
That's good.
Oh, fantastic.
Sounds good to me, anyway.
Wait a minute. The Teal Rabbit, please introduce yourself. And now I will get off the stream because I want to fix some audio maybe on my end.
Okay.
We'll be back really quick, okay?
Okay. Go ahead and introduce her. All right.
Yeah, you go for it while Luna figures that stuff out.
All right. Well, hello. How is everyone doing? My icon didn't pop up, so I'm going to see if I can fix that in a minute. But I am Twin Rabbit on YouTube. I am Tale of Two Rabbit here on the Twitch. And I am actually a professor of anthropology who comes at the discipline from an indigenous perspective. So I've tried to bring that to my work. What I do on YouTube is predominantly videos which are focused on the indigenous interpretation of previously fairly well-known historical events. So, for example, the origins of communism and anarchism and a lot of the theories that were coming out in the 1800s, how that originated with a lot of tribal work that was in the Americas and in the Pacific. I've also done analysis of critical race theory and how that was influenced by indigenous perspectives. And then on Twitch, I tend to do Let's Plays of indigenous and indigenous adjacent games and games that were developed by indigenous creators.
Nice.
Yeah, I think we're still waiting for Luna to come back, but yeah, I will say Neofeud is a game that was developed by myself, who is an indigenous creator, and thanks to Twin Rabbit or Two Rabbit for playing it on the stream. Greatly
Yeah,
appreciate it.
I've been enjoying
should
it.
do that as well,
My
actually.
stream's been
Yeah.
enjoying it a lot too.
Nice.
Also,
Yeah,
Tim,
I've been thinking about doing it as well because I've been playing lots of like action games and stuff on stream, but I think something that's like a little bit more detailed and stuff might be good.
yeah.
honestly,
Also,
same as well. I've been speaking. I remember saying this when I first bought the game a few months ago, saying that if I were to play a game on stream, it would have to be Neofeud. That would be the first one that I'd have to try, and
Nice.
I'm gonna stick to that for sure. I haven't played any games on stream yet, so when I do, it'll be that one for sure.
Nice.
What were you saying before, Spook? I think you were about to say something.
oh no, I was also gonna say also thanks Tim for featuring Neofeud on the video, which everybody should go watch.
Oh, yeah.
Conquest of Dread has the highest quality production value videos on the internet. I don't know how Tim like hasn't like taken over Weta and isn't making like Thor Ragnarok 2 right now. I don't understand.
I've got
Tim
a bunch
is-
of friends working there, and it doesn't seem like they have much fun. So I think I'll just another thing. Another amazing thing about Weta is that their name is like the name Weta of the production studio is like they've used the wrong word. It's like a slightly different word, but they thought that is the name of the it's like a kind of like a little cricket kind of thing that we have down here with like big spikes and stuff. It's like this gross little monster bug. So perfect name for like a production special effects company. But yeah, the word that they use, because it doesn't have the Tohotu, the macrons in it, you don't stress the vowels as much, and it actually just means like dirty and filthy and like gross,
Oh no.
which as from what I've heard from people that work there, it's pretty apt for the work culture and environment. So but it's like the classic like outsiders like co-opting indigenous language for their business and fucking it up. But anyway, I just thought that was funny.
It's both a tribute and a warning. It's very handy.
Exactly. So here we go.
Yeah. Anyways, I just want to say thanks. I know because I did kind of organize the last one, and I know I kind of hit everybody up. So again, this is like not super formal. It's kind of informal like the last one. But I mean, I kind of like the center topic, of course, is indigenous peoples, indigenous histories, and in particular, we wanted to talk. Luna, in particular, and I were discussing the how indigenous history and indigenous peoples and their cultures influenced left ideology, left thought, like Marx, Kropotkin in particular, concepts of communism, anarchism. And of course, we had to have Twin Rabbit, because Twin Rabbit, if you haven't seen it, Twin Rabbit has an entire video, an hour video just on that topic. So I don't know if you want to kind of jump into that or just kind of brief discuss that a little bit.
I can a little bit. The genesis of the video, and this is gonna, at least a couple of names will be recognizable. The sort of inspiration for the video was Lance from the Surfs and Thought Slime were having a conversation about Karl Marx and leftist theory and all that. And at some point, one of them said something about primitive communism, which was a term I hadn't heard since I was in grad school. And I'm like, why are these guys discussing this 100-year-old nonsense theory that Karl Marx came up with literally off the top of his head, that he didn't have any evidence for it, but he just sort of invented it out of whole cloth? Why are these guys talking about this? So I started doing some searching, and I actually came across several different references, one of which was Philosophy Tube, and another one was sort of tangentially related to Conquest of Dread. So
Nice.
yeah, so I ended up getting inspired to make a video where I sort of tore apart the nonsense of that argument based on, okay, here's these two guys who are using this term that has no basis in reality, and here are these reactions to that concept that are saying, maybe we should have some more indigenous presence on the YouTubes and be talking about this stuff. And I thought, okay, well, I got nothing better to do. I can make a video. So yeah, and it ended up, that GIF of the phone starts to ring and then it just keeps vibrating until it falls off the table. Apparently a couple of people on Twitch found my video. I do not know how. And suddenly people watched it and they really liked it. And I even I messaged one of my friends and I said, oh my God, I have fans. And my friend messaged back, but why? So it's been a very interesting ride. But yeah, the initial inspiration for that was Karl Marx kind of didn't know what he was talking about when he started saying things like that. And Kropotkin liked to, flatter native populations by saying that he was inspired by them. And then he calls us all cannibals. So it's like, some of these foundational Western anarchist and communist thought leaders, these big beardy daddies, and they're racist pricks. So we need to address that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think there's I think. Oh, sorry. I think I could have echo coming through somewhere. Anyway, I think there's a thing that I hear a lot where people talk about. They'll say Marx directly ripped things from. Hear people say, "Oh, he ripped things from Maori culture and systems and all this kind of stuff like that," which I don't think is true. I don't think it was it's not that he copied ideas or anything like that. And I think there's a lot of conflation there. I think it was actually in pre-capitalist economic formations where he talked, I think it was in that one. He talked about it a little bit more about how he was studying, and when he died, one of the books that Engels found, and there was a book about Maori culture and mythology and stuff. It wasn't so much that he was studying exactly how he did things, but it was more about the cultures that led to specific economic formations or economic relations, I would say. Which I think is a lot more I as someone that obviously had Marx's worldview and was thought the way that he did, that makes a lot more sense, and that's I think it's a lot of people get kind of a bit carried away and sometimes oh, he stole everything from us and all this kind of stuff. And it's no, I think he was just kind of interested. And it's I think sometimes people will get even a little bit kind of lost in, I would say, the noble savage kind of idea, where people would be I often see a lot of, foreign, Pacquiao or whatever like that. And they'll be oh, he stole this from all, these like he stole this from Maori or whatever like that, and
Yeah.
there's like I don't
Hey,
think
wait
I've
a
seen
minute,
many people like us talking about that, like
Hello, a minute. I
Oh,
just want to receive feedback really quick. How am I sounding now?
Sounds good.
sounding good.
Sounds good to
Oh,
me.
really?
There's no buzz.
Great. Thank you, EJ. You did it.
You're welcome.
To my-
Get donated to the Socialist Rifle Association fundraiser.
Yeah, EJ is doing the fundraising live stream for Socialist Rifle Association right now.
Oh, really?
And
Cool.
I think that, when we finish this live stream, we will rate to his fundraising stream.
Nice.
Okay, I'm so happy that my microphone, my audio, and is fixed now. Okay, so, well, continue, comrades. What have we been talking about?
We're talking about the influence of, I guess I would say, like, yeah, I mean, it's what we're here to talk about, the indigenous influence on I guess like early or like I guess like popular leftist thought, I would say.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and it's like, I think that there is a lot of back and forth with that as well. There's the influence of, like even like Marx was really interested. Marx and Engels were both really interested in the island of Tonga and its systems of government and stuff. And it was kind of like they were inspired by a lot of these cultures. And then it's weird these days because, like we see a lot of people over here or in Tonga and like throughout the Pacific who have taken Marx's ideas or Marxist ideas, not Marx specifically, but, like people that came later and have really kind of helped that, I guess, like level up their own struggle, like their own kind of, I guess, like class analysis or anything like that. So I think it's like, I don't necessarily think it's like a one-way street, I think there's like the free exchange of ideas has really done a lot for in the Pacific particularly.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
And the cross-pollination is an issue.
Yeah, it's a
Like
better
in
way
the
of putting it,
Caribbean.
cross-pollination.
Well, it's a big issue in the Caribbean because of Franz Fanon.
Yes,
who,
absolutely.
you know,
Yeah, and he's another one that like we fucking love that guy down here.
Oh yeah, and came from a privileged background. That's how he learned about Marx in the first place. Read a lot of one of the things that I've encountered with people reacting to my work is them saying, "Oh my God, this is so reminiscent of the stuff that I was taught when I was younger, sitting at the lap of grandma or whatever. I never realized the relationship between this information." And that's part of what I really wanted to get started was these ideas, regardless, I even say in the original video, I don't want the copyright on Marxism. I don't want the copyright on anarchy. What I'm interested in, well, these ideas are in our cultures already. They're in our cultural heritage. We were already discussing these concepts. So rather than it being Marx is the guy who invented everything and we should all have a personal altar to him in our house, instead of it being that, why aren't we talking about the influence of each other on actual anarchist praxis? Because if you look at the Hood Nazi, you've got a group who were around for 1,000 years. And yet, like, the Jura League is touted as a great example of success, and they lasted for less than a year. So it's like, okay, but we've got other examples. We can cite other anarchist approaches and successes, and we don't have to stick with just these 4 guys who got together and spoke Latin at each other once a week. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I
Hey,
feel like,
we're just being raided. Welcome, raiders. Welcome, everybody, to the stream.
Welcome.
Yeah, we are talking about how, like, indigenous culture kind of have big influence on Marxism or anarchism. And actually, like, we want to learn about that stuff. It doesn't mean that, like, we, as the Rabbit just said, like, it doesn't mean that we want copyright or something or take all the credit. We just want to learn about this and then to make sure that, like, we all, like, integrate each other, learn from each other, and know the nature of those ideologies to build a future society.
Yeah,
I have one funny
and that's
thing
the
to.
thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, no, you go for it.
I have yeah. So in Vietnam, like Ho Chi Minh he adopted Marxism-Leninism since like 1920s, early 1920s. And the thing is, once Ho Chi Minh learned about Marxism, Leninism, and Ho Chi Minh and communism, he tried to bring back our indigenous culture that we've been living for thousands of years, and they like perfectly match each other.
Yeah.
Because Vietnamese people, we about 6,000 years ago, we live as tribe, and like we were very collectivist and socialist even before those words was invented. And we live with each other, we share each other, we care for each other. And also imperialism and colonialism like try to erase all of that culture and to bring individualism into Vietnam. And Ho Chi Minh, as like he tried to build a counter hegemony, when like he bring back the love for the nation and the traditions of Vietnam. We talk about that a lot. The tradition of Vietnam, and is like integrate with communism, Marxism, Leninism, and to build a society today. That's very interesting too.
Yeah,
absolutely. That's I mean that's the same kind of thing that that a lot of I would say like radical and like radical whatever Maori groups have done over here. Like back in the day, like Ngā Tamatoa were like like traveling around, going and meeting. Like they went over to China and they went over. Like some of them were going to Vietnam and meeting people and kind of learning about the strategies and tactics that worked there and what not just learning from like the successes but also from other people's mistakes and everything like that, trying to I guess I mean that's like the thing, right? The idea is like this this cross-pollination of ideas or whatever, like this free information that like it's a lot of people get very stuck up in like like they might read a book from like 100 years ago or whatever, and they'll be like, okay, this is the way we got to do it. And I think it's also the same way with people getting obsessed about like indigenous practices. They'll be like, okay, cool, well, this is the way that we used to do it 500 years ago, so this is the way that we should like we should continue to do it. And I mean, I think there's like a way that we can learn from all of those things and still kind of like none of our cultures were ever just sitting still. No one just like, they didn't reach a point and went, okay, cool, this is how we're going to stay in stasis. Like our culture is going to stay like this forever. It's kind of like a melding of ideas and, always moving forward, So, I think that, like Ho Chi Minh taking, these ideas and then bringing them to Vietnam is like a perfect example of that. And I think a really good kind of, I guess, like a wake up call to a lot of people that, just like get very stuck in one way.
Exactly. So like I've been talking a lot about Ho Chi Minh thought, and not really any books about Ho Chi Minh thought are translated into English yet. And so my long-term plan is to translate the official curriculum about Ho Chi Minh thought in Vietnamese into English. So the thing is, to put it in a very simple explanation, Ho Chi Minh thought is just like a system of Ho Chi Minh's ideas about how to apply Marxism, Leninism into the material conditions of Vietnam. That's all.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so like to think like a lot of people like, well, communist society is totally like utopia and we cannot reach that in our like in human history, but actually it's not that of a utopia because we did it. Indigenous people, it has a characteristic that indigenous people like us, we did it thousands of years ago before capitalism existed. And also to build a communist society, it doesn't mean that we go back to like primitivism we're denied all the scientific like achievement or like commodity production or something like that. No, we still keep like the quintessence, the best of the previous society, and then we bring it then to for the future society. It's going to be very different, I have to say, but we have to try our best.
Well, we have we have like Tiganga, which is like kind of like I mean, it's like some people just say it's like protocol, but it's actually kind of like different. It's more like a philosophical kind of thing, but and it's kind of like we can apply these values, this Tiganga to anything, It's like, and it doesn't like we don't have to live the exact same way, like our great-great-grandparents did or whatever like that, but we can
except that we have to though, because if we don't count as indigenous anymore. right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, just as an example, for the Hawaiian history, for those who don't know, for example, many Americans think that Hawaiians lived in huts prior to colonization, when in fact, Hawaii actually had the longest life expectancy by admittance from Captain Cook himself, the British colonizer who showed up and wrote 80 to 100-year Hawaiians were everywhere, the most robust and healthy people I'd ever seen prior to contact from this is without all the technology. That when the technology from the human technologies that the Hawaiians gained access to from that side of the pond, they got even better at what they were doing. But the Hawaiians already had 100-year life expectancies when Europeans were dying nasty, brutish, short lives, often because they're fighting wars in famines for their feudal lords. And what I argue is the imperial complex of endless barbarism with feudal capitalist slavery and now neoliberal, neo-feudal hellscape characteristics that has never ended. Hawaiians, on the other hand, did not live in huts. The U.S. deindustrialized Hawaii. Before 1898, Hawaii already had electricity. It had mass transit, and it had railroads. I have a whole thread that just has images of all this. They had 300,000 plus newspaper articles, magazine printings. We were bilingual and trilingual. Iolani Palace, our capital, had electric lights before the White House, this is just totally disregarded. Hawaii also had a higher literacy rate than the U.S. and Europe before colonization and the banning of our culture and language, erasure of our history, and ghettoization of all of our people. We were often, again, bilingual, trilingual, and world-renowned diplomats, as admitted in Paris in 1869. The European visitors were Hawaiians under our ali'i king. It's a misreading of the word ali'i, which is closer to steward or, I don't know, coordinator, what somebody like the current coordinator of Vietnam or China is today. But Kamehameha III brought books of law, newspapers, agricultural products, Bibles, textbooks, and other printed works as civilized accomplishments. Europeans exclaimed, how is it possible that this island nation is ahead in literacy and enlightened countries of Europe, every country, France, Britain, America, all behind Hawaii? How is that possible? Kalakaua, one of our leaders, invented a subaquatic vehicle when Jules Verne dreamt up 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. So they're just writing science fiction books about submarines. We already had submarines. Hawaii was a literal living Wakanda, an indigenous future that's more technologically, economically, and sociopolitically advanced. Because not only were they more technologically advanced, when the United States had black slaves and the Chinese were chained up to build railroads in the West Coast under terrible racism and the lynching of Asians, the worst lynchings of Asians, Hawaii had full citizenship for black people, for Asians, long before the Civil War, and also democracy, existing social. They called it a king because the colonizers would have completely installed a governor general and lorded over all of the stolen. Pineapple is also not a Hawaiian food. So Hawaiian pizza was a settler's idea in Canada to sell more pepperoni, cheese, and
all right, I'm gonna have to give up Hawaiian pizza now. Damn.
Yeah, I'm sorry. No more Hawaiian pizza. It's canceled. It's colonizer pizza. Okay. Also, Hawaiian shirts were settler co-optation of Filipino culture and Hawaiian culture. So, but anyway, you can wear your. I'm not saying don't eat it, but I'm just saying that's the history. Pineapple. There are slave plantations on Maui. In 2010, Maui Pineapple was caught bringing in Thai workers, holding onto their passports, throwing them against walls, beating them, abusing them, holding their wages for months and months. They were treated literally like slaves on the pineapple plantations in Hawaii, on Maui, within the last decade. So this is not done. Colonization, slavery, it's Juneteenth, but slavery is still here and alive and well in America. And in Libya, where America bombed them into slavery, slave markets. But anyways, I'm going to finish this real fast, but I want to get this history out before I continue. An example of actual equity, democracy, and existing socialism with racial hatred eliminated, greater technological advancement in a people of color's nation. As I said, the word hui in Vietnamese and Chinese and Hawaiian means the same thing. And Hawaiian and Chinese, there's a food called manapua, which is a Hawaiian word that means mea ona pua'a, which is the tasty pork thing. But it's a fusion of Chinese buns, the pork buns, and like dim sum with Hawaiian harvesting of pig, and come together in the hui, which are worker-owned cooperatives, which predated by the West by thousands of years. That's why the word is the same. It actually means credit. It can mean credit union. It can mean informal club getting together to build a rock wall, or I don't know, an advanced cyberpunk adventure game development company to overthrow imperialism, which is what we do here at the Silver Spook Hui. And so this word is actually the same across cultures. This is why the Hawaiian and Chinese fused so well and worked together. The Chinese didn't ban Hawaiian language, and the Hawaiians didn't kick all the Chinese out. Unlike what Americans, Canadians, Australia had the white Australian policy that banned every other white country. kicked out everybody, particularly if their eyes were a certain shape, if their skin was too dark, they just kicked them all out, or they enslaved them, or they mass arrested them, or I don't know, they buried their children in the schools like Canada did by the 215 and thousands of them ultimately. So Canada was not the end of the Underground Railroad. Canada had segregation. Hawaii was the end of the Underground Railroad. It was indigenous cultures that have actually realized social, economic, and political equality. Hawaii was social. It's not really socialism with Chinese characteristics. It's more like Chineseism with socialist characteristics. Hawaii had Hawaiiism with socialist characteristics in the 1800s with universal healthcare, with universal college, the highest literacy rate, and more advanced technological, kind of like 5G and I don't know, the Chinese space station, Changwei is already up there. And America's limping around trying to figure out how to like not drop the planes out of the sky because they lost all their semiconductors because they're not paying their programmers and they're instigating ridiculous trade wars. So my final note, Hawaii was overthrown by the United States. Why? Because like many other socialist countries, like Bolivia, Elon Musk, we will coup whoever we want for your lithium. I don't know, like Cuba, embargoed, sanctioned into oblivion, right? Hawaii was couped by a U.S.-backed gunboat diplomacy to smash in actual indigenous non-white countries, building of an anti-racist, socialist, thriving country. And they literally committed genocide by banning our universal health care, on top of banning our language, which is its own form of genocide, on top of denationalization, destroying our nation, which is its own form of genocide, kind of like, I don't know, the Palestinians. But anyways, Asian, Pacific Islander, and Latin American countries have followed the blueprint of America and the West's military, industrial, and hybrid warfare, coups, destructions, and there have been at least one coup per year backed by the United States just in the last 7 years alone. But these follow the same pathway, which is that indigenous, I would argue, indigenous people actually make up the vast majority of Earth. Africa and Asian peoples are all indigenous people. Did the Vietnamese settler colonize all of Asia? Did they go to the Philippines and round them all up in boats and then bring them all back to work in the pho restaurants? Did they? No. Indigeneity is defined against European settler colonialism. Imperialism, as an Indian a Marxist economist has recently said, imperialism and capital, you cannot have capitalism without imperialism. So this idea that you have this, these things all come together with Euro-colonialism. And so if we define Euro-colonialism as that which is not indigenous, indigeneity is the most of the planet. China is an indigenous advanced civilization. Whatever you think or don't think about it, that's who they are. And what are the Vietnamese, the Hawaiians in the 1800s, the Bolivians? Do the Bolivians stop being indigenous because they have advanced lithium refineries and they have STEM and science and technology and they're not living exactly as they were before? That's the question I want to ask. I wager that Germany, France, and the G7 are going to classify the Bolivians as not indigenous anymore. Because when you wear a suit, if you code yourself like an advanced civilized Westerner, you lose your indigeneity is a term that was coined. Why? Because black slaves were different from the indigenous quote unquote savages. That's indigeneity itself is a colonizer a term in that sense, right? And that's one thing I really hate about it because I don't like being called not indigenous because I work on artificial intelligence and video games to undo imperialism. Because I don't
it's
live in.
It's like we ourselves living here, we never call ourselves indigenous. That's white people call us.
Yeah, it's like I think it's like
anyway,
you know, it's kind of like it describes your relation to, like, if you're in a settler, you know, a settler colonial state or whatever like that, indigenous describes your relation to that state sort of thing, you know, like to the settlers or whatever. But it's interesting because then you get to areas that it's not so black and white or anything like that. Like I find it when you get around the Pacific, it gets kind of weird as well because historically there was like a lot of movement throughout you know, the entire ocean. Like to Moana, Nuakua was kind of like everyone was like, it was kind of like, you know, like cousins. Everyone would trade and go back and forth and all this kind of thing. So it's kind of like weird when people, you know, like it's like people just decide from this point. It's like, okay, cool. This is, you know, this is where we decide who is indigenous or not or whatever like that. Whereas like, yeah, I mean, I think like a lot of like the end goal in a lot of decolonial movements is to abolish the category of settler and indigenous, you know, to like make them materially indifferent, you know, like to like that's the point when everyone has like you know, like the equity and well, yeah, it's like all equal and all that kind of shit like that. Like whether that will ever actually happen, whether that's just a utopian pipe dream or whatever, I don't know. But I like, yeah, I'm not sure. So I'm not so much sure personally about that, but I understand what the intention is there.
Yeah, I just want to clarify one thing, and I'll let Rabbit go. Is that I'm not saying like that like I'm just saying I want to question like the category indigeneity because it can it's basically that which was not colonial, that which tried to live equally, and because it can be weaponized to say if I have friends that are game developers like Megan Byrne at Achimostan Games, they're indigenous game developers, and they cannot be allowed to make games that show their indigeneity unless it's like the white person's museum. You got to look like an Indian. No electric moccasins. No advanced buildings. You got to look like the Indians that I think of you in the 1700s or the 18. If you don't look like those Indians, we're not giving you any funding. We're not giving you any help. You're not indigenous anymore. So that's what I mean by that. It's just like the weaponization of that category. So anyway.
Well, I only had 2 points. The first one was actually a question that was in the chat. It was from SC. Was asking about what's the advantage of proto-communism, which the whole point of my video was, well, exactly. The whole point of my video was there is no proto-communism. Marx made it up. It's a nonsense thing. It never existed. That's not a thing. The Nazi League had a government. They had a constitution. It was structured. They had specific authorities. They had delegates. There were various councils that could disagree with each other and debate on various premises. Marx took that idea and said, well, that's great and all, but they have loincloths, therefore they dumb. And so it must be a primitive form of me who is white and therefore much smarter. And so what I'm thinking up is a totally new original idea, but clearly these throwback cavemen had something similar. So what I'm building on is the primitive communism that they were practicing. And Marx was lying when he said that. So that's what my video was about, was there is no such thing as proto-communism. There is no such thing as primitive communism. We have to actually recast how we discuss the way that different societies structure themselves. And it doesn't need to be relative to a bunch of frat boys in 1850 who memorized a lot of Latin and thought that made them cool.
Well, so that's like the thing, right? It's like quite infantilizing because it's like defining other cultures, systems of governance only in relation to, like something that is, like something European that we know of or something like that. It's like, no, this is its own thing that, like wasn't an early version of anything else. It was its own thing. So
and
I totally get what you said.
Let's face it, the Internationale was just Mean Girls, the frat boy edition. Come on. There was a breakup. There was a breakup and they were mad about it and they picked sides. Have you read the letters they wrote after the first Internationale? It's seriously. But the other thing that I would bring up, especially in reference to the indigeneity question, was Alan King had mentioned earlier, if anyone knows about the colonizers from China that were in the New World, I think we need to reassess how we question even the word colonizer, because it's not that the Chinese colonized the New World. They were just there. We have the genetic evidence. It's on the west coast of South America. The populations that are in the Pacific, starting from, you can go to Australia, you can go to New Zealand, you can go to Hawaii. These populations have specific genetic traits that can be found on the western coast of the Americas. Is that Comrade Rooster?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yes. I got a shout out from Comrade Rooster. You've made my day. Okay. But we also have genetic traces from what are now called sweet potatoes. And those over in Hawaii, they end up over in New Zealand, and they predate any Europeans who traveled those routes. So
I think we were talking about this last stream, actually. Last time I was over here, so we were talking about the trading throughout the Pacific back to South America, and how it's like, they describe it as this like one-off journey, like the Thor Heyerdahl thing, where it's like they talk about, oh, it's only possible this one time, and it was like some kind of current that carried them all. But then it's like we have all these stories of like going backwards and forwards, like different generations trading and all this kind of stuff, and literal like archaeological evidence. But some people still like stick by the Kontiki guy, even though he's like not really considered an expert.
Yeah, Thor Heyerdahl, who was so screaming full of crap. But not only that, the migration model for the Caribbean, like literally my graduate work, the Caribbean model of migration had not changed for 150 years, and it was based on a guy named Fuchs who literally did not know what he was talking about. He'd visited like 3 sites and decided that the people in the Caribbean were too stupid to figure out how boats work.
Yeah.
So his entire model was premised on either they walked along land or nothing. So like boats didn't even factor into his analysis. And this idea that there was this gigantic trade network that spanned all of these bodies of water, they have no trouble believing that Greece ruled the waves. They have no trouble with that. And Greece was 3,000 years ago. But the idea that brown people figured out how logs float is just too much. That's a step too far. So like for me, the way the indigeneity conversation really breaks down is they're trying to set us against one another and say, you're Maori, therefore you have no connection to my people who were in the Americas, which is a totally separate species from the people who were over in Hawaii. And it's like, no, we hung out about once a year. We traded, we knew each other. It was cool. We got along just fine until you buttheads showed up. So yeah.
I mean, like that's one thing I often define indigeneity. I mean, obviously I'm like, I call myself a dialectical semiotician, but basically like I would like to read new meanings into that word. Like, hey, that you can have, somebody said, do you really have electric moccasins? The fact that somebody has to ask that says how diseducated we are. Yeah, they've been at powwows. I'm sorry. I mean, like they're everywhere. It's like indigenous people, they've been doing all kind of things, anyway. But yeah, it's like that which is indigenous is that which coexists for our native Hawaiians under aloha aina, like the love of the land, the deep, wide, massive love, not like I want to go out with this person and I want to turn them into a trophy wife and then dump them. I mean, like literally like deep care and what you feel when you're with your comrades standing against the police for Black lives, or I don't know, on line 3, stopping fossil fuel pipelines. That deep connection to other people who they're not the same exactly as you, not your same family. They might not even be from the same country as you. You don't speak the same language, but so aloha aina kuleana, responsibility, pono, that which is right and just, and hui, again, multi-thousand-year-old word that transcends thousands of years of migration across the Pacific and also thousands of years and also thousands of miles all the way back to China and Vietnam, as we talked to Luna on the AAPI stream. And so like indigeneity is that which coexists peacefully with each other, with the land, in mutual respect. I don't know, sometimes leftists call it mutual aid. It's kind of like providing from the ability to according to need, right? You provide from your ability, your kuleana, your responsibility. This is the way I want to think about it. Your responsibility is if you can work, like if you're not disabled, if your legs are like very much injured, your back is so sore, you're elderly, you can't walk anymore and it's without excruciating pain. Like ableism people are talking about, that was not a thing in our culture. If you're able to, you're 20 years old and you're healthy, you provide, you farm, you work. Luau is a living version of that, and according to need. So if you don't take the 1,000 pounds of pig, sell it and then accumulate that in your bank or your rock wall or in your palace or in your crown or in your slave built Wall Street, which slaves built Wall Street. You don't accumulate, you give, and there's no hoarding. There was no hoarding in Hawaiian culture. There's myths about the one ali'i, the steward who hoarded, tried to become a capitalist, a king, a slave plantation owner, right? And I group all those together purposefully. The one ali'i out of 99 is called the flying kalo, the myth of the flying taro here. The one ali'i who tried to hoard is literally ostracized, and the community with actual restorative justice, because we had actual communities, unlike the West, which has none. It just has a bunch of competing neoliberal homunculus units trying to maximize their personal wealth. When you have community, then you can say, hey, you can't hoard. You can't be Jeffy Bezos because that's going to hurt all of us. And if that person, ideally that person without violence would come into the right, it would come in back into the community. And that's what ho'oponopono, that to make right. And so anyway, so it was actually existing pre the concept of socialism, communism coming from the West. This was already there. And so that's indigeneity, is that which it's not perfect, right? Because you do have, there's an acknowledgement. Yes, sometimes we have conflicts. Sometimes some people did try to hoard, but overall, right, from the commanding heights, which is another, I think, believe Leninist term, from the commanding heights of the society and the structure, we root out the barbaric and self-accumulating and greed and self-aggrandizement based society, imperial society, or colonial with colonialism is nation to nation exploitation, pillaging, and so when you exist people to people, family, partner to partner, even parent to child, even imagine that, not having an abusive parental structure and people beating each other and also abusing kids in public schools, not just residential schools but just schools generally. And so I argue that like indigeneity is not, it's like, to me it's like that which is coexisting peacefully with each other, with the land, the aina, that which not to say that like you can't ever take any resource out of the ground, but you understand that you are in an ecological, circular collective relationship with the land and with each other. And that's why you pull together to, stop pandemics, like which East Asia and also Hawaii had 20 times less COVID than the parts that have been most Hawaiian culture preserved. We have done the best because we pull together, we hui together to stop COVID. We hui together to build houses without any, Bloomberg accumulating $30 billion worth of gentrified, overpriced rent on the back of police violence, right? So that is indigeneity. Indigeneity is living communism, socialism, are trying as best as you can under the current international capitalist imperial conditions. So that's kind of of course, I'm like kind of defining it in a way that's not necessarily what people understand it to be, but because so many. I look at Luna society and I see, when I've looked through their history, not zero conflict, but compared to Europe, 1,000 times less, like on perpetual warfare, Protestant on Catholic.
It doesn't mean that we are perfect, but it's just better. Like it doesn't mean that we are fucking perfect, but it's way better. It's like when I talk about my country, Vietnam too, it's like, hey, things are not actually that bad. If you compare to the USA, a lot of people are like, oh, but Vietnam has this problem, Vietnam authoritarian, like. What are you talking about? I didn't say that Vietnam is perfect. I just say that it's way better than in the US. That's all. That's my point. It's so weird.
The goal is to suck less. That's the goal.
Yeah, that's always a goal. I just wanted to go. I saw some stuff in the chat. I just finally actually looked at chat and I just scrolled up a little bit. And I think Alan Kennedy was saying. I think he was speaking in terms of the progress historical materialism. I think that is talking about what we were talking about like Marx or whatever, like taking influence from, like we're saying he, like he didn't copy directly or anything like that. He was like inspired by or whatever. And someone else said, where was it? There was, so Dave L, one of the mods, says, I have to push back a little. Just because primitive and indigenous aren't the same thing doesn't invalidate Marx's take on how class evolves over time. And I think that's what we were talking about right at the beginning of the stream, where it was kind of like, what I like to, like remind people is that Marx wasn't so much copying. Well, like it's like he wasn't looking at the way societies like over here or in Tonga and stuff operate to emulate them. He was looking at the development of these cultures and their relations to capital and how those relationships kind of like not to capital, but to production, and how those relationships kind of came out. And he spoke. It was to, I think, Vera Zasulich. He was saying in some letters that he was excited to see how these nations like Aotearoa and Tonga and stuff, how they would kind of like carry on their, I think he used pre-capitalist modes of production to like how using traditional values and things like that, how they would develop new ways to, resist capitalism and still exist by continuing these like pre-capitalist modes or whatever, which is like, I think that's like socialism in practice, like adapting their material conditions and it's kind of stuff. And there are people, like there's people out in the islands now still doing that. There's a guy in Tonga, Ralph Regan Venue, I can't remember, who has been a politician over there for years, and that's like his whole thing. He's been like, he's been in government there a couple times. He's like he's really onto it. He's a real big lefty, and his whole thing is about kind of, because Tonga have rules about land ownership and all these kind of things that a lot of the time they just get like this kind of like they get overruled by traditional law and traditional kind of protocol and stuff. So even though they have rules about what you can do with land and stuff, a lot of the time these rules that set by the government just get completely kind of ignored, and they're just kind of it's settled within communities. And so this guy is his whole thing has been like, how can we as the island of Tonga maintain our own thing, our own, I guess, carrying on the pre-capitalist mode, but still, like resist the outside world, resist the capitalism outside, and kind of maintain our own, I guess, their own sovereignty as, like a nation. But I mean, and it's like, it's up and down. Like sometimes he's in favor and sometimes he does really well. Other times he gets, he's been arrested before for helping out, like prisoners and things like that. But I feel like that presence, like how he has such like I think for the last like maybe 30 years or so, his continued presence has been really important there, and proving to other islands that it's like you can resist this, you can set your own I mean, I guess like you can decide what works for your culture better, and we don't have to like immediately jump into bed with like all these other nations kind of like and incorporate their methods of production. Because a lot of islands in the Pacific, like I know that like Saber has spoken a lot about the underdevelopment of Africa, but the same thing has happened in the Pacific, the exact same thing. And like countries like New Zealand in particular, New Zealand, America, they have, and Australia have had a lot to do with targeted legislation to underdevelop the Pacific, to keep all these island nations dependent on, dependent on other nations. Whereas, sticking to the pre-capitalist modes kind of allows them their independence, which I think is why that there's such like there's a link there in, like a lot of decolonization movements throughout the Pacific is very, very linked to, I would say, like Marxist thought, and the kind of, the rejection of the capitalist mode.
Speaking of Saber,
sorry, that was like a tangent.
Well, no, that's important. But I do want to hear from Saber, because we haven't heard about our other indigenous people from the majority of Earth, which is in Asia and Africa. We need to hear from Saber.
Yeah, listen, many great minds. I don't want to interrupt. All right. So yeah. So I'm lingering on what Tim was talking about. Yeah, it's like one thing that I have noticed a lot is that the way people look at the underdevelopment or the super exploitation of the global south, right? Oftentimes the perception seems to be like completely flipped, in the sense that a lot of people would almost see it as opposite to what it is, right? What we're talking about is almost like a parasitic relationship from the global north imposing itself on the global south, whereas like a lot of people in the West right now we'll kind of see it in the same way, which is why you get so much horrible anti-immigration rhetoric, and the kind of talking points like, these people need to go back to where they came from. And my first thought is the reality of the situation is that if it was the global north that were to just stop interacting with the global south, they would be in a lot more trouble. Well, we would be fine in that sense. They would be the ones that are struggling, because obviously they have the resources and the labor is coming from us, right? And in particular, like I'm kind of reminded of a situation in Kenya that occurred in the 50s, and something that I spoke about in my latest video, and it has to do with the Kikuyu people, right? And to give an example of just how like sinister the British Empire has been, which a lot of people still in the UK don't know about, considering it's considering how favorably the British Empire is still seen in the eyes of the UK or Britain, for example. I think as late as 2016, I think around 46% of people were like, they view the British Empire favorably, which can indicate one of two things: either they are ignorant of what has happened, or they know what's happened and they just recognize that they were the primary beneficiaries of it. So they don't really they want to try to uphold that system. And in particular with the Kikuyu people in Kenya, right? from what I remember, like over like 4 million acres of like arable land were seized by the British, and
Um,
they were essentially selling off that land for like, I think it was roughly 1,000 to 1,000 European families for a penny an acre. This is the arable land, and in many cases, the people that were forced off their land had to basically go back and work on that same plot of land, except all of that labor, all of the sort of surplus was taken by the British to fund their own endeavors in the neighboring regions, including Uganda and even elsewhere on the continent as well. And looking into the way the Kikuyu people were living or existing prior to that, which has often been characterized by, or was characterized by the British as primitive or savage. The typical thing that they tend to do. It's the ultimate form of projection, in my opinion, because if you're going around claiming to want to civilize people, and yet your main mode of doing that is by just wiping out cultures, wiping out languages, philosophies, all the kinds of amazing things that were in many cases lost. And thankfully we do have content creators such as yourselves that can try to bring that knowledge back to the surface and to share what the incredible things that people have been doing in the past that don't that exist under a very different economic model than the ones that we have today. It kind of debunking the idea that like, oh, there is no alternative to the system, as the witch Margaret Thatcher said in the 80s or whatever. Right, so like so when it comes to like the Kikuyu people, right, they had this very interesting, pretty sophisticated communal society, and they had various mechanisms for ensuring that like conflicts were resolved, or to also ensure that like they were able to just forge really strong bonds. And when the sort of when the Kikuyu people were fighting back against the British forces, one of the things that they used to sort of bind themselves together to develop a stronger fighting force was to leverage their spiritual traditions to do so. And of course, the British would see that as a primitive thing, and as a result, they tried like various ways to break apart the bonds, because they realized that like most of the people did not want to break those bonds, and so they had to try various ways of doing that. And this ultimately resulted in the British declaring a state of emergency simply because of these Kikuyu people trying to fight back for their land, which is a common story across the world. And a lot of them, up to like 1 million, I think, or more, depending on the statistics, because it's varied for various reasons that I can get into in a second. That like, well, put into these camps, and they were treated horribly. They were treated, there was a lot of torture going on, a lot of violence and coercion and things like that. All because they had the audacity to fight for their land back. And what makes it even stranger is that like during like World War II, a lot of the people were fighting for the British. They were fighting for the British, fighting against the Nazis and all these kind of things. And they were sort of contracted to fight against other fellow Africans across the continent as well. And rightfully so, they thought that, oh, maybe after this the conditions will get better. Maybe after this we'll get some kinds of rights and things like that. But turns out that after the war it kind of got worse, which is so ironic, because we're often told that like we're often told of the horrific things that had gone on in World War II, and obviously so many travesties were had been inflicted upon Jewish people and others as well. But when you look at what the British were doing after the fact, throwing 1 million people into these camps, and that's just one area in Africa, right? Much less to be said about what they did across the world in various other places too. The conditions that these people were suffering under is just really kind of throws a wrench in the idea that like the British Empire is this civilizing force that's going to save these people from their so-called savage ways. And ultimately, and this is something that people don't really talk about because they don't really know about it. And one of the reasons for that is because after this was after this was exposed, after the British were essentially forced to wind down these camps because of certain massacres that were just too hard to cover up. They basically burned a lot of the documents. They burned a lot of documents detailing what's happened. So even to this day, a lot of people still don't know the extent to which the extent in terms of how bad it was. And so that's just one example of resistance that I think needs to be spoken about. In particular, one of the main leaders that I urge people to look into by the name of Dedan Kamafi, who was one of the not only people on the front lines, but also seen as a spiritual leader as well, which kind of talks to the power of religion and spirituality on the sort of revolutionary context. And just to kind of branch slightly outside of Kenya, in Uganda, which is basically next door, I'm kind of thinking about a situation whereby you have this neo-colonial puppet who is essentially controlling the region, who has been president longer than I have been alive, which is just wild to me. Like the only so-called legitimate election was the first one, and we've seen what happened in January with the elections that happened over there. But like an interesting thing that did happen is that in once the president Museveni was essentially going after really trying to straight up genocide the Acholi people in the north of Uganda, and it was just and again, it's one of those things that people don't necessarily even know about. For example, they may have heard of the Rwandan genocide, right, where over a million people were killed, but a lot of people don't know that in the north of Uganda, like actually more people had been killed. But the difference is that it was done over a longer period of time, and it's gone completely unnoticed. In particular, with the US that's propping up the president, and a response to the sort of genocide that was going on was the formation of the sort of what's known as the LRA, which is the Lord Resistance Army, I believe. And one of the main leaders of that is Joseph Kony, which people may be familiar with based on the name because of the Kony 2012 documentary that was I think that was, it's been almost 10 years now since then. But yeah, like, so basically what he was doing was leveraging religion or leveraging Christianity to essentially try to mobilize the forces, but then of course because of the opportunism went in and essentially just used it to continue to oppress those who didn't want to join his forces. Right, he did things like take children as soldiers to try to fight and stuff like that. So it was definitely terrible. But like, and this kind of ties into sort of the culture of the Acholi people too, because there's this the name is escaping me right now, but there's this process for essentially forgiveness, in the sense that you can go around to a lot of these places, and there's this idea that like, even it doesn't matter like what the person has done, as long as they come back to the community. It kind of reminds me of what I think Silver Speak was saying earlier. Come back to the community, acknowledge the stuff that they did, take accountability for their actions, and then like everyone forgives and they just forgive and they move on. And it's a very beautiful concept which kind of highlights the like one of the ways that like they were able to sustain themselves for a long period of time before they were colonized. And it's interesting to see how these kinds of traditions have made its way through, even despite active efforts to try to wipe out these kinds of ideas. So yeah, those are just two examples from East Africa. I definitely urge people to look into it a bit more. But yeah.
Yeah, that reminds me
go
of this. Over here we have like I guess like a philosophy of, I guess, like like a restorative justice kind of thing, which a lot of the time just gets like reduced to like balance or like revenge or something. But there is actually a really good old New Zealand movie called Utu about a Maori soldier who fights for the crown and then kind of he witnesses his own village being burned down, so he kind of switches and goes on this like, you know, Tarantino-esque rampage against the British forces, which is pretty good. I've used clips of it in videos before. But this
I'm kind of okay with everything you've said.
What's that? Sorry.
I'm kind of okay with everything you just said.
Oh yeah. No, it's like it's a great movie. It's really good. Actually, Tarantino said it was like one of his favorite movies, and you can really see it. I think it's better than like, you know, a lot of his movies or whatever. But yeah, like this and this whole process is like at odds with you know, with I guess like colonial justice and colonial law and all this kind of thing like that, which is I guess like kind of why it was really important for them to like get rid of it. It's great, but yeah. Also, what you're saying about Renby, there's like this huge like legacy of colonial empires using the kind of you know, like using the people of these newly, I guess, like acquired states or whatever, you know, as their kind of like you know, like as their foot soldiers and various other conquests. And that's something that we've seen a lot throughout the Pacific. And it was kind of like this, there was this whole idea that we were this new little kind of, I guess, this burgeoning little nation, and we kind of needed to prove ourselves to this great Commonwealth, this alliance or whatever. And it was wild. Like there's like plenty of stories. I mean, like there's so many stories of people going away to fight in World War I or World War II, and then coming home to find that their land had been confiscated. And then we had a system where if you had fought in the war and you fit certain criterias, and you know, like 90% of that criteria was being white or whatever, that you could go into a ballot and receive a land parcel, and you'd get like a farm, and you'd get like a bunch of money to set up. And this didn't just apply to like, you know, like white New Zealanders. It also, you know, like a lot of there was like a lot of Yugoslavian dudes, a lot of even like white South Africans who New Zealand had fought alongside in the past also qualified for this. So it was also kind of like this you know, like this really backhanded way to, I guess, like you know, like to colonize the country or whatever by you know, like bringing in all these people that you know, it was like this kind of thing, like tying it to the sense of like, you know, you've done your duty for this country and this is your reward or something like that, you know. And so there's a lot of like these, you know, big intergenerational farming families in New Zealand that are like gigantic, you know, and like, you know, like these farms that are worth millions and millions and millions of dollars. And yeah, and it all kind of comes from that era. And, you know, like people get really resistant to the ideas of like land back and stuff, because they're like, no, my grandparents, you know, like my great grandparents got this for like fighting in the war or some shit like that. It's like, yeah, just after they were done fighting my great grandparents in the war on that land, you know, like,
yeah, you get a good cut for stormtroopers, you know.
Yeah. But I think it's like this thing. It's like, you know, like it's like building this kind of, I guess, like this national identity, this ideology around that that war, you know, fighting these wars together and stuff. But there have been there's been a lot of stuff written by a lot of Maori dudes that went over and fought, like, particularly in Vietnam, and then, you know, kind of went over there and realized that they were fighting the same war that their, you know, parents and grandparents had fought, but on the other side. There's a really good poem called The Gunner's Lament by James K. Baxter, which is about a Maori gunner who's dying, and I think he says it's like a paddy field north of Saigon or whatever, and just realizing that, you know, like I think there's like a line, I should find it actually, The Gunner's Lament, and it's like kind of recognizing this this common struggle or whatever. It's, oh, here it is. Yeah, he says, what does he say? Where is it? Yeah, and I saw the reason for it in a Viet Cong's blazing eyes. We fought the crops of kumara, and they are fighting for rice. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff in there about it's really dark actually. But like this idea that there is this one struggle that we're all fighting, and it's it's against imperialism, it's against colonization, and all those kind of things. But they always try and swap around, and they try and tell you that you're on the good side now, or like these guys are the bad guys, and then you get there and you find out that you're the bad guys. So it's a pretty pretty common story.
Like connecting to the
It's
connecting
really
to the
sad.
title of the stream in that way, this idea of indigenous influences on Marx. We've touched on, okay, well, that doesn't invalidate Marx's theories. Marx wrote 130 years ago.
Yeah.
We need to move forward, and here's my thing. And I'm not calling anybody out. Here's my thing. As we've already alluded to, part of what Marx's analysis was approaching, and this is something Kropotkin then replicated in Mutual Aid, we need to draw on these indigenous sources. I mean, even though he was a racist douche and he made some really horrible assertions, both of them were saying, here are these indigenous populations all over the world who are doing stuff we can learn from. To my mind, one of the ways that we not only critique Marxism, but also advance the message of the next step is we start to revive those traditions, and we start to talk about the heritages that we've lost. Like one of the videos that I wish was doing better on my channel is about the Two-Spirit traditions that are present in not just the United States, but also in Central America, some a little bit in South America, which I don't know as well, so I didn't put as much of that in there. But like queer traditions that existed for literally thousands of years before conquest, and we don't talk about it anymore, so nobody knows that history. And yet these are the same civilizations, and that way of weaving together disparate parts of their own communities is something that Marx found so laudable that he tried to include it in his theories. Like, I think it would do really well if we started talking about those sorts of things. The Native Religious Freedom Act passed in 1978. Within my lifetime, it was illegal for Native people to practice the religions that anarchists and communists keep celebrating as this font of knowledge and resource on how to construct a better society. And, now these power atheists are coming in here saying, oh, well, that's all primitive nonsense anyway. And it's like, well, Marx didn't seem to think so. That, to me, when we talk about the influence on modern anarchist and communist and socialist thought, we also need to be addressing those social sides of it. So I'm glad, Saber, Tim, I'm glad both of you have brought up that there are whole cultures that are being sort of leveled off in this, advancing toward a nobler society narrative. It's like, no, we have individual problems that we're having to deal with locally, and we've had individual solutions for them for a long time.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, right? It's like, everyone talks about developing socialism. You have to adapt to the material conditions of, the area, the people, the place, and all this kind of things like that. And I feel like looking at, and I think this is obviously why those guys were looking to indigenous examples, because they're looking at, how did this, the small island in the Pacific, how did they, develop society versus maybe, like a nation, or how Marx also referenced the Iroquois and stuff like that. It's like different areas, different agricultural practices, all these kind of things. And I think that it's instead of just kind of trying to I guess compress something into one specific mode, it's kind of that's very antithetical to what a lot of communists and anarchist actual thinkers have said. It's like we need to actually look at each group individually. Everyone has different kind of needs, and I think it was both Mao and Lenin spoke about how different groups needed different you needed to tick off different boxes with different groups to meet their revolutionary potential or whatever. And I think that's something that a lot of people kind of skip over. And I guess it's kind of when people kind of try to reduce everything just to class and not kind of acknowledge the different different kinds of identity and all these kind of things like that. That's that's like a lot of the stuff that they're missing out on, and I think that's like statements like that actually kind of are really affirming when you're talking to people that are actually kind of like quite reductive about issues of class and things like that.
Yeah.
I think people are
Yeah,
also like under
exactly.
the impression that like these ways of life just kind of like withered away just like randomly. Now
Oh, yeah,
we're just
yeah.
trying to like revive
Yeah.
them. It's like, no, if you like look at the history, it's
They
like,
were
no,
bombed and slaughtered away.
development- Yeah, it was interrupted. It was stopped and reversed in many cases, right? Like we had there's this so much destruction that was bestowed upon all of us, which is something that we all have in common. And it's like, well, we were as we've been saying, we had our own contradictions. Of course, wasn't perfect, wasn't sunshine and rainbows, as people like to
Yeah.
have these ridiculous straw mans and saying that like, oh, but like, why do you want to go back to being, I don't know, like primitive, as we were saying, quote unquote primitive, right? And it's like, no,
Yeah.
like we were developing in our own way, resolving our own contradictions, moving towards various forms of organizing societies, and based on the environments that we arose out of, was sort of one of the things that would determine how the economic structures will work, or how the relations between peoples will work, and even with things like religion and spirituality too. And so it's like like one thing that I do try to push back on a lot is just the idea that like these things, as I was saying, just disappeared out of thin air. And it's like, well, no, like if you look at a lot of the ways of organizing, you can even see them slowly but surely like re-emerging today in a lot of in ways that that just do not give credit to the original people.
Yeah.
Like I've seen just these waves of permaculture YouTubers right now, and it's like, and they're making it seem like it's this new thing. It's like, oh yeah, like look, now we can just regenerate the soil. We can just have annuals that can exist all throughout the year, and have self-sustaining farms and permaculture. It's like, well, what do you think like indigenous peoples have been doing for thousands of years? Cultivating the land and ensuring that they can meet their needs in various ways. And so yeah, so I just wish that more people would sort of recognize or to give reference to these kinds of places, because of course there's a lot of other things that went into their societies beyond just things like permaculture, right? There's this whole interconnectedness between, for instance, working with the land as well as having a deep like spiritual connection in many ways as well. That without that can lead to things that like are seemingly antithetical to the idea of being self-sustainable in that way. For example, like it's all well and good to have a nice permaculture thing, a commune or whatever, but like if the way you're interacting with people is still very like patriarchal and toxic, it's not gonna last very long. And that's we need to have this sort of holistic understanding of what it means to live together with each other and with the land as well.
There's
one common denominator is that like so many indigenous cultures around the world have acknowledged this and have understood the importance of this. So
yeah, we have like a kind of like a underlying concept in like I guess like Maori kind of I guess like the worldview or whatever is whanaungatonga, which is kind of like it describes like the relations between people or whatever, and it's like to be in good relation, and it's kind of like and it's like to other people, to the world, to the environment and all these kind of things like that. And I think like a lot of people just I guess like the liberal kind of take would be like, oh, it's like to be good to the world, to be good to people and all this kind of thing like that. But then I kind of also think that there is an overlap there when we talk about like the relationship to class and production and all this kind of thing like that, like into the land is like kind of like restoring traditional relationship with via like the decommodification of land and things like that. And I think that there's a lot of stuff that in the traditional kind of worldview where it's like philosophically it lines up very well with like I guess like more like modern kind of like communist and anarchist kind of thought and stuff like that. But I think like we don't need to kind of like recreate historic structures exactly as long as we kind of like I guess kind of respect the intention, I guess. Respect the intention of our kind of like, like ancestors and the culture and all this kind of things like that. Which I mean, I like kind of getting more into, we're supposed to be talking about history and future sort of thing like that. Like a lot of people think about the future, like they might think of like a indigenous future as this kind of like, like Wakanda like nation where everyone's like, it's like we have flying cars, but they have like the Tino Rangatiratanga flag or something like that, sort of thing like that. Whereas like I feel like for me, like the future that I could see would be more of a, just like not, technologically no kind of like, I don't know, no better or worse or anything like that, but just in a state that is much more in harmony with the environment and, like I guess like, where everyone has a place to live, everyone's fed, the waterways are clean, all this kind of shit like that.
Yeah, it should be like bare minimum, right?
And it's like, yeah, exactly. And it's like, I don't feel like that, like, it seems like that's actually like, like you think like that's actually like quite utopian, but I don't feel like it's a lofty goal, Like,
No, like I mean,
somehow
just
we're
to
radically
bring
fulfilling that, right?
a successful indigenous civilization, the Vietnamese are the indigenous future where they have no fear of fascism, housing, healthcare is taken care of. They defeated imperialism like how many times? So I bring this up, but like the Vietnamese are Wakanda, but not everybody don't have the flying car yet. They're working on it. The Vietnamese rockets, I'm sure, will be taking off with collaboration with other socialist countries very soon. Before Elon can get his little rocket mobile off the ground because he's too busy breaking his workers' legs with his cops that he loves. So, I think that, I want to bring Luna in because, like, again, I'm going to say this one thing that I want to throw it to Luna. First up, I apologize that the United States Empire has used Hawaiian territory, our stolen land, to launch B-52s into Vietnam. I have Hawaiian people who are on Mauna Kea who fought, sadly, in that war. If you fight for the U.S. military, that's the only way to get your healthcare, your housing, and your education. It's a sick bargain. And Hawaiians, Black and brown, and indigenous people are vastly overrepresented in the U.S. military. That's part of the game. Is like the stormtroopers, they kill every Tatooinean, and then they enlist all the Tatooineans to give them a gun. They say, go to Naboo and kill everyone there for our profit, and then you can have a cut of the settler colonial land. And sadly, I have family members that even fought against the Vietnam, but the ones who know and discovered their Hawaiianness, we have had it banished from ourselves. So I just want to personally apologize for anyone who has come from Hawaii and the U.S. Empire that has launched its aircraft carriers, the B-52s, Pohakuloa, where they're bombing right now to practice starting war with China in the South China Sea. So get ready, Asia and Pacific. We must unite against this new Cold War because they are rapidly spiraling up for this. I can hear them bombing at night. Here, they're ramping it up as we speak.
Gosh.
Do not believe that the United States will not slaughter another million Koreans, Vietnamese, Pacific Islanders. They do not care one rat's butt. My family members are dying from 180 million gallons of poisoned fossil fuel from the United States aircraft carriers under Red Hill right now, leaking into our water supply. But I want to throw it to Luna and say, a Hawaiian, if you're a Hawaiian and you're in the military, quit. If you're U.S. military, U.S. police, quit immediately. If you work for a corporation, quit immediately and start a cooperative. Stop working for work. Quit the empire. Do a fin and quit the empire. You know, in the recent Star Wars, all the white boys hate that because a black person quits the empire and starts doing the right thing, which is called allying with the Vietnamese and all the socialist peoples of the world and not fighting the goddamn and fighting against the new Cold War, which could be the new hot war, which is the last war we'll ever fight because we'll all be radioactive wasteland soon. So I want to throw that to Luna and say, Luna, how do the indigenous Vietnamese build this amazing, like even better than Wakanda because it's like less reactionary and like closer to the way.
Yeah,
like,
and it's not monarchy or whatever.
Yeah, not monarchy. How did the Vietnamese do this?
Oh well, actually I am making a video talking about the Vietnam kind of left-wing nationalism, and I talk a lot about Ho Chi Minh and Ho Chi Minh's thought and a lot of his quotes that never got translated into English too. So a thing that Vietnamese did, I don't know. I'm flattered that you cover like Vietnam. What kind of, though we know that we have so many problems and we need to still need to fix it. Like, wow. The thing is, Vietnam, we know that we are victim of colonialism, imperialism, and capitalism for centuries. And the thing what we do is like we don't want anybody to to bear the same thing,
Yeah.
like we had to. The only one thing we do is, my gosh, Vietnamese people, we are so freaking nice people, because generally speaking, again, Viet tribe, 6,000 years ago, we live in peace, and we really like share and care about each other, and but the thing is, like, now we never want to conquer every country, and the thing is, I don't know how to explain it. We just want other countries to leave us the fuck alone, especially like the US or other rich capitalist country. Please leave us alone. We'd be so happy. It's like we don't want to seek for any fight or any war, but you also should not touch us. You would regret badly. Look what the last, like, we won against colonialist France, and then fascist Japan, and then France again, and then the USA, and then even the very short war with China in our north border too in 1979. Also 10 years fighting against Pol Pot up until 1989. I just please leave us alone. We'd be so happy if you really do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I just want, just to, kind of, I mean, I'm kind of I'm sorry to put you on the spot. Vietnam is, it's very much an inspiration, because, what I see in Vietnam, as I was talking about earlier, where Hawaii was a successful socialist, indigenous, living by their ways. It was a socialism with Hawaiian characteristics, and Vietnam has fought. Obviously, there's a lot of, you can't answer that question. It's not a thing you can answer in like 2 minutes of a stream. But what I see in not just Vietnam, there's other places, even like Laos, Cuba, Bolivia, to a large extent, is when the indigenous cultures, which are very much mutual aid, they have very much what the West called communism and anarchism values embedded in them, and also they are informed by the history of socialist and left thought, right? You need the vaccine to inoculate yourself. Really, you need Marxism to inoculate yourself against the AS1, the AS116 variant of Westernism. Really, it's called capitalism, right? And then you need the today you need the Janus Varoufakis against the techno feudalism that is burgeoning. You need the YF 113 variant to you have to be inoculated with the ongoing understanding of what the capitalist barbarians are doing today, what the Western barbarians, and the Greeks had the same tropes against the yellow peril, red scare. This is a multi-thousand-year-old conflict when you go all the way back against the collective communist yellow dark Persian hordes in Zack Snyder's 300, and it comes all the way to the present with the Wuhan flu. And just on that one, it's really like, another thing people don't know is that the Hawaiian and Chinese were incinerated by the United States to death in Hawaii, in Chinatown. And I'm speaking specific. I don't know if you know this, but white capitalists, I just found this out in the last 2 months. White capitalists in Hawaii set fire to, after they stole our country and ghettoized Hawaiian and Chinese, banned our culture, banned our language, banned universal healthcare, banned universal education, destroyed our socialist successful Hawaiian blueprint with a U.S.-backed coup, not unlike what they did to South American countries, not unlike Chile, not unlike what they tried to do to what they actually did to Libya, and then they installed slave markets there. Very recently, under Gaddafi, who had universal healthcare, universal education, a Chinese and Russian launched $billion satellite, which Evo also got, that was going to help empower a African National Bank, African Monetary Fund to counter the colonial monetary fund. That's why it's very much like Hawaii. Libya was Hawaii. It was Hawaii. Vietnam was even more violently Hawaii in that sense, right? And after they did what they did to us, the Western barbarians under capitalism, the white capitalists in Hawaii set fire to Hawaiian and Asian homes and businesses in Chinatown and forced us into the blaze. 10,000 people's hui cooperatives, businesses in Chinatown, making manapua. Again, Hawaiian ethnic and economic equality, speaking Hawaiian and Chinese and Japanese and Vietnamese. I had Vietnamese students. This is where I'm from. This made me so sad. I cried when I read this. They pushed us into these fires in the 1900s. They set fire to the Chinatowns. They said, Wuhan, these were bubonic plague. The Asians are sick. The sick men of the East. This is part of that whole racism. All of the East Coast of America, half of America's wealth was built colonizing China and then calling them sick people. The Wuhan flu has a deep history. and then they called us Hawaiians. They didn't differentiate Kanaka Maoli, Hawaiian and Chinese. Y'all Chinamen, Vietnamese, Japanese, Korean. We don't care. Y'all Chinamen. You're all sick Easterners. All the way back to the Greeks, if you really dig deep enough. You're all just sick. You're degenerating the great Western values of our Socrates and our Platos, right? And it was the same thing they used against us here. They incinerated us. They pushed us into the fire at gunpoint. Whites, white cops, and white capitalists. At the same time, sick white people who got the plague as well were put up in posh hotels. They stripped us naked, humiliated us, Hawaiian and Chinese together, and Japanese and other Asians, all Chinamen to them. And then, or N-words, all interbreeding, making us sick, degenerate, cultural, biological, pandemic, and economics and empire are all the same thing. If you have a degenerate empire, this is the explanation, and actually Marx participated in this. Marx called the Chinese hereditary stupidity was why they have fallen. Their empire has collapsed, and that's why they deserve to be incinerated. They burned us to death. They burned us to death in our houses, in our businesses. They don't. I just found out about this, like just within the last couple of months. I've been saying that almost every stream because my family is from this area. It's Kalihi Palama. You want to know exactly where it is? It's where Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, one of the highest paid actors who recruits stormtroopers for the U.S. Empire. He is from that area. He stole Snickers and Twix from the same 7-Eleven in that burned to ash Hawaiian and Asian coexisting cooperative living standard that the United States incinerated. My family luckily survived. My parents is Hawaiian and Asian. I am Asian and Pacific Islander. That is the legacy of Hawaii. Nobody. That's another legacy that, like, I don't even. My parents, they think that it's their fault. They don't. They think, oh, we're all Western capitalists now. They buy all that crap. This is the long, sad history of Hawaii. We were the most advanced technologically, socially, and politically, and now we all think, well, we are just subservient N-words of the Pacific, and all the Asians are just the sick people bringing the Wuhan flu, bringing their stolen technology from the West. They're the Chinese. They can't do anything right. The Asians, the Vietnamese, they're all backward authoritarians. We were all more advanced than all of these clowns, and then they burned us to death for it in our own fucking houses. So, anyways,
they bombed Vietnam to the Stone Age. They fucking bombed us to the Stone Age, and they sprayed 80 million tons of toxin on Vietnam. And now they claim that Vietnam is so poor. It's our fault. Like, what the fuck is wrong with those
even now,
people?
right? It's still
I am
very difficult
really
to grow
tired.
in some of those areas, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. There are hundreds of barrels of toxin right now that still got buried under the Vietnam's jungle, because when in 1972, when the USA left, they just left like hundreds of barrels of toxin back here, and we had to deal with them even until to this day. And nearly every month, Vietnam will find like an unexploded bomb somewhere under the ground or under the river. And like now they blame the victims. I'm so freaking tired of those. Even leftists like, oh, like Vietnam is not communist. Vietnam is not socialist. Vietnam is capitalist right now. Look how it's so fucked right now. Like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, with Vietnam, we've been attacked by both anti-communists and ultra-leftists. Like here. Like anti-communists also like, we so fucked right now, we're so poor, it's all because of communism. And ultra leftists say like, oh, we're not communists anymore, we are the traitor of communism. Like, those people.
Yeah.
I think on that really dark note, I'm gonna have to jump off. But it's been great hanging out with everyone. And great talking about all this stuff. I'm gonna jump off, but thanks for inviting me on again. Thanks to all of you for having a good chat, and I'll see you all again sometime soon.
Thanks for being here, Jim.
Thank you. Bye.
Well, and okay, Saber, because I noticed a lot of your work is Afrofuturist and solarpunk adjacent, and in some cases very directly. And I actually had a couple of people who compared some of my work to solarpunk, like foundational concepts. So to my mind, I didn't actually know what the term was when they said that. And it's been really interesting to look into the background of that story. I think I watched the video that St. Andrew did on it, some of the ideas that have contributed to the overall aesthetic. And I really liked what he had to say about the idea of not only reclaiming these traditions but incorporating them into a different view of the future. So I was kind of curious, like in your conception, because this is work that you focus on, in your conception of like land back and Pan-Africanism, what do you think are like really big points that people should hit on when they're discussing a future that doesn't have that same capitalist influence, that we're not obsessed with flying cars, that we're talking in a different direction? How do you like shift the convo immediately away from that sort of thought process?
Yeah, well, the immediate thing that comes to mind is just changing the primary incentives of this system as it is right now. This, the incentives that center around like infinite growth in a on a planet with on the solar system with finite resources. Because obviously, even as these billionaires are trying to etch their way out into kind of like colonizing other worlds, if you sort of factor in the exponential growth, those places or even the near solar system will be depleted in the next few hundred years anyway. It's just incredibly unsustainable, and I feel like we definitely need to be moving past a system where these kinds of whereby like the environment itself is seen as this externality. It should be seen as an integral part to the society as a whole, in the sense that like sustainability should be like the number one priority, and that just isn't the case right now. And like one of the things that becomes like really really clear as I start to really study indigenous societies is that like those kinds of principles were at the fundamental level of the society, and then you kind of like build up from there. So like as we were talking about trying to look at our history and then to apply it to our present today, not being dogmatic about it in the sense that we're just copying pasting, but you're just taking the principles, subtracting it away, and then applying it to where we are today, and then to try to shape the kinds of future that we want to. And because there's this idea that like, oh, like just because we want to bring these principles and try to bring them back because of they used to work for us before we were interrupted and before our ways of life were completely, in some places completely erased, right? In today's society we have a lot of technologies today that can really take us a long way. We don't have to necessarily like wait for flying cars. You don't have to wait for nuclear fission generators in order to, or even the self-replicating robots and these kinds of things, just to get to a point of abundance whereby like everyone can have their needs met. This seems to be the thing that's like really on the minds of a lot of people out in the AI space and things like that. They're like, oh, once we get some kind of artificial general intelligence, oh, now then at that point we're going to be able to generate all the things. It just won't make sense anymore to not distribute all of these things to people, to every human ever. And it's like, well, it doesn't really, well, from our perspective anyway, this doesn't make sense right now because of how, because of the tools and technologies that we have, as well as the ideas that have allowed us to live sustainably throughout history. So it's about trying to take those ideas, projecting it into the future, and saying, hey, look, like our future can be bright. We can have all of these like, wonderful technologies, solar generation, other kinds of renewable forms of generating energy. Obviously, based on the based on the place that you're talking about. Some places may involve more solar, some places may involve more wind, hydroelectric, things like that. And yeah, just really trying to like imbue the kinds of ideas that have taken us a long way. And I'm kind of reminded of an Afrofuturist book that I was reading a couple months ago, called Binti. And one of the interesting things that the author addresses in that book is that, like, even though we're talking about a really like futuristic society, the technologies that the main character Binti uses is there's this kind of symbiosis between the technological developments as well as the sort of spiritual and religious traditions that have allowed her people to really try to infuse various concepts, whether it's mathematics and these kind of things as well. And Yeah, like it can go so many different ways because like even now, like even though there's a lot of solar punk works that I recommend as a means, Silver Spook has spoken about a couple times, is that like we definitely need more like just straight up like indigenous cyberpunk, indigenous solar punk, indigenous these kinds of things. And um because like there's this, the possibilities are almost endless, right? I don't, when I hear Silver Speak talk about or even you yourself, or even Luna talk about the ways that the way that you've existed in the past and things like that, I can only, like, my brain just almost explodes. I'm like, just okay, just take all of those things, map on the various technologies that we have today, and I'm like, oh my god, I can't even think about this right now. I'm gonna explode. I can't. And it's just like, yeah, like it's like an ever evolving process. It's one of the things that's like, it's an ever evolving conversation. Like being on a planet where existing as we are right now. Um, we definitely need to be focusing on our own local and national sort of national level type thing in terms of meeting our own material conditions based on these kinds of things as well. But like then taking that to the next level and being able to cooperate on a global scale, like fusing various cultures in non-exploitative ways in order to open up possibilities that we can't even imagine right now. So yeah.
I like it. And I want to make sure you said Binti, this is the one by Inedi Okafor?
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
Nyeri Okorafor, yeah. Yeah.
Okorafor, thank you. Okay,
Yeah,
sweet.
highly recommended.
I think I
It was very
recommended
short
that
as
to
well.
Saber. I just want.
Yeah,
Nah,
yeah,
maybe
yeah.
I didn't. I don't know.
But possibly, yeah, because I remember speaking to you about it briefly. But it's a great book. And the first one is the first one's very very short. I got through it in like maybe 2 hours or something like that. Very very short. And it'll give you a good taste of what I'm talking about in terms of infusing these kinds of technologies with kind of a spiritual way of living as well. And do it being done in a non like forced way. It's very natural, and it's like, wow, like I don't really see too many works of science fiction in general across these various subgenres of science fiction that that really that really do these kinds of things. A lot of it seems to be very centered on, if there is representation, it's done on a very superficial level most of the time. For instance, if you look at a lot of science fiction of people of that has an African actor or a black actor, 50% of the time it's Will Smith. So it's like, okay,
Right.
and even then it's like never really talks about anything beyond it. I don't know. It's just, I don't know. There's so many examples that I can think of where it's just like, okay, so you're in the future and stuff like that, but somehow like the sort of contradictions that exist in that world just do not seem to address. It just doesn't seem to map onto reality, and you can almost always tell, even if it's not directly, that this person has not decolonize their brain. That's what we need to do. We
Right.
need to decolonize our brains and to develop these kinds of things, anyways. And it goes beyond even just like solar punk and cyberpunk and Afrofuturism, because I also finished another book recently that goes into steampunk, which is something that you wouldn't even typically associate with Afrofuturism. But like, the book is called the Black God's Drums, and it's the same kind of idea that, like, oh, even if the steampunk in and of itself is typically very like Eurocentric, focuses on this sort of Victorian era of trying to the Victorian era, trying to relive those times, somewhat nostalgic in that sense. This book kind of takes that and flips it on its head and focuses on a focuses on an African or black person, right, who is trying to navigate through the world and is observing these kinds of things from a different perspective. For example,
Nice.
just focusing on the fact that, like, typically, like, on the fact that, in order to even facilitate this sort of steampunk society, it requires a lot of like child labor, for example, and there's a lot of poverty in terms of people that are on the bottom of society trying to navigate their way through this world. And like, one thing that I really do like about these books is that they give you a very real, um, very relatable, especially for those of us who have suffered under the hands of the systems that we have right now. But in addition to that, just figuring out how to sort of work through those contradictions to the point where the characters are in many ways, reach a kind of liberating state towards the end of the book and stuff like that. So I feel like it's very important to kind of keep those things in mind as well. And yeah, I feel like I'm definitely looking forward to like looking into more of the sort of indigenous science fiction and stuff like that as time goes on. As I said before, I was really looking forward to playing Neofeud and the second one as well. It's like, yeah. So,
speaking of indigenous futurism, yeah, Neofeud. I mean, as an indigenous person, I can personally attest that is an indigenous futurism. The first one is more cautionary. Indigenous cyberpunk, basically, it's kind of like screw the entire Western capitalist imperial racist classes garbage hole system with its gold diapered and emerald diapered babies in the cases of it. Literally, Neofeud is so anti-capitalist that I was refused publishing by 2 different publishers who said, remove the Bushes, the Clintons, the Gates, the Waltons, and all these critiques of capitalism, and we'll think about publishing. And I said, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I'm going to go and talk garbage about all y'all broken ass G7 countries that are abject failures and you're all imperialists. And I'm going to put that all over Steam. And Neofeud, somebody said, oh, people didn't like Marx on the stream. No, we just critiquing some of his early works. But somebody actually said Neofeud is a multi-dimensional representation of Marx's Das Kapital. So there we go. The indigenous game with some leftist, saying that I understand Marx. There's an unemployed college student with $300,000 of student loans sitting on the sidewalk in a tent city reading Das Kapital in Neofeud. So if you want to see that, anyway, I should stop selling my video games. But Neofeud 2 is definitely, indigenous futurism. There's an entire stream that myself, Saber, and several other science fiction writers and creators did on indigenous and non-Western centered decolonization of science fiction last stream. So you can read that whole thing and definitely do read Vinti because it is very based. But yeah.
Thank you so much. Thinking about that too, and I'm thinking about we're knowing about that stuff and about what's happening in Vietnam right now. Even like we are still doing the decolonization. Even until to this day, Vietnam is still learning and trying to bring back our traditions. That is hard because like it was like hundreds of years that all of those most powerful nations are trying to like erase our culture and traditions, and we are trying to bring them back. And also lots of people say about religions and Marxism is something people say like there's no freedom of religion under communism or something like that. It's absolutely not true because Vietnam is brewing a totally different like aspect of it. There is freedom of religions in Vietnam. And the only one thing that's different, like in the West, especially in the USA, is like our Communist Party or our government is non-religious, and no laws or policies or strategies are in favor for any specific religions. And that is why usually Christianity, they cry out loud and scream that there's no freedom of religion in Vietnam. Even though if you go to the Human Rights Watch, write the front page about Vietnam, they still say that there's no freedom of religions in Vietnam, and I find this very ridiculous.
I'm just gonna say it. As somebody who's lived in the United States under its illegal occupation, I've been to Washington, Portland. I've been to New York. I've been to the Heartland, the Northland. I've worked for 3 different billionaires, and I can tell you, the United States has no democracy. It's a democracy-free, rule over all free, white supremacist, capitalist, barbarous, thankfully collapsing, omnicidal shithole country that is the biggest evil on the face of planet Earth today, in collaboration with all of its Western friends in the G7. And Vietnam has far more equality, far more religious freedom. I mean, from everything that I've observed, far more freedom, actual freedom to speak without hurting other people, and all the freedoms that you need. Freedom from, more importantly, freedom from want, freedom from homelessness, freedom from health carelessness and dying from COVID-19, freedom from fascism,
freedom from police brutality too.
Zero police murder.
I live in Vietnam for nearly 30 years of my whole life, and I have never been harassed by police, not even once.
Oh, I've been harassed all the time, by Hawaiian cops.
It's and when I said out loud like, hey everybody, the police in Vietnam is not actually as bad in the US, a bunch of people, especially white, say like, oh, I'm doing propaganda. Like, it's like you terribly lack knowledge about the nature of police. Even though we call them police, maybe the same name with totally different nature. Lots and lots of police in Vietnam are actually socialists or communists. And it's absolutely different than and they protect people's interests. And here absolutely different context about police in the US, where they does protect the capitalist, the bourgeois class with their money.
Yeah, just one comment on that I wanted to bring up, because this is something about Hawaiian. This is how the parts of Hawaiian culture survive and live today. Despite, I call it, we're on the Big Island where we live. This is why we have the Silver Spoon Cooperative, where we have Comrade Rooster and chickens crowing all the time, because it's a residential / agricultural zone. It's been that for centuries upon centuries. It's not like somebody wrote an NYU a professor didn't write some paper about why food bombs is good, actually, and some ecological with a bunch of sesquipedalian words to get a PhD so they could wave it around and get tenure. Well, I mean, sometime before probably 2000, because nobody's getting tenure ever again. And they come down and say, you know, I'm going to just drop seeds all over. Hawaiians, we've been doing that. Vietnamese have been doing that this whole time. When I look at Vietnam, I'm like, oh, yeah, there's a cow next to an apartment building with solar panels on it that's better than any building I've ever seen, because it's all rusting 100-year-old slums with like rats and bed bugs that have never been killed. But in Vietnam, get like, you know, not necessarily brand new, but like functional, nice buildings. And then you have a food garden there. We've got a kalo patch. We've got an avocado tree there. We've got a breadfruit tree over here. We've got, you know, all the kalo. We've got lots of time to tend it. Why do we have a lot of time at the Silver Spoon Cooperative to tend it and raise our children? Fun fact: we only we actually home educate. Why are we doing that? Because we don't have to pay a lot of rent. Why are we actually live for free for 3 years in a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house? How do we do that? Because the police in the Big Island, this part, not Oahu, not Maui, where all the stormtroopers are, in this part, there have been 0 evictions for 5 years. 0 evictions. How are you going to maintain Vancouver $900,000 valuations? How are you going to keep Toronto and New York and every piece of real estate across America that the private equity firms at Goldman Sachs and et cetera are buying up, by the way? And there will only be no, Bloomberg just published The American Dream is Dead. You will never own a house again. You're all neo-feudal serfs forever. Get ready to worship your landlord and bow down, or the cops are coming for you. On the Big Island, there have been 0 evictions, which is why you cannot, the police do not even enforce the needs of capital, landlord, rent lord, work lord. It's called a corporation. It's called a new plantation. They don't do that. That's how Silver Spoon Cooperative even exists. The Hui can only, if we were on Oahu, I'll be too busy trying to become a high-frequency trading algorithm programmer for some bank. I'll be too busy trying to sell off bits of Hawaii as a real estate agent, right, to Saudi F-35 purchasers and billionaire clowns like Musk, who are buying up, or Larry Ellison buying up $330 million worth of us. Mark Zuckerberg just bought 600 acres of Kauai. Larry Ellison, Oracle CEO. He literally runs American TikTok. That's why it's all screwed up and it doesn't show indigenous people anymore. Larry Ellison owns all of Lanai. So those parts of Hawaii, sadly, deeply colonized, but where Hawaiian culture lives, actual existing Hawaiian values, aloha, kuleana, pono, not capitalism, not defending white supremacy, not defending capital of landlords and of bosses, even the governmental structure with the people. It's also why Big Island had 20 times less deaths and cases than Oahu, and which Hawaii had less cases of COVID, is because the values live through the people, not perfectly, always in there are constant incursions. That's why this place is called Hawaiian Paradise Park. Because somebody from New York said, hey, I made a ton of money pillaging the Chinese. My mommy and daddy did that, like, you know, last century with, like, you know, everybody who was LARPing with the Iroquois, like in the video, that to a rabbit. And with all that money that my mommy and daddy made at Standard & Poor, at Harvard, at Yale, at all these East Coast wealth, I want to buy a piece of Hawaii and I want to turn that into New Waikiki and make another billions. I want to make a killing pillaging the Hawaiians the way that we pillage the Chinese in Africa. But when they try to do that, the people of this side of the island, and part of it is there is military, there is economic, there is government, and there's twice the rate of veterans here. Then many of them are Hawaiian. There is a variety of systems and structures in place that keep and push out. You can't get a loan. You can't get even the approval to build a luxury resort like in this area. You have to bring in 2 cops from Oahu or Maui, $10,000 per cop. You got to pay for their flight. You got to pay first class hotel stay for both of them to get one eviction done. So the landlord, private equity firm and giant bank from New York that owns like 1,000 houses here in the collapse of 2009, they're saying, how they say, well, how are we going to get the management company to evict the tenant so we can collect rent from the next one, right? When somebody's squatting, they literally cannot get the eviction done. What does that do to the housing prices? That is a kind of, it means that without the violence of the police kicking people's asses out of houses, out of LA, out of apartments in New York City, get ready for the mass eviction wave, by the way. Tens of millions of people about to lose their house in America. Without the police with doing that, backing capital and backing white supremacy, backing landlords, you don't have, that's part of how we even exist, right? Now, how do you get there in a place like fucking shithole United States? I mean, I maybe back the indigenous people and land back, maybe back the decolonization process, right? Because America sure as hell ain't gonna do it. And all the temporarily embarrassed millionaires who want the cops to defend their corporations on the land that they have and their apartment buildings, when the 200 million white people or whatever number of them and also people who buy into the American project, they want the cops there to defend their houses when they become. Of course, not most of them are going to become millionaires, but that's the American trick. The American scam is y'all ain't never going to be American dream. You're never going to all reach the American dream. It's a lottery ticket, just like the COVID vaccine lottery to bribe little babies to go get a goddamn shot. But
you are all like Amber's millionaire.
So but as long as everybody believes that, right, that sustains the capitalist structure and all of its, anyway, yeah. That's a lot, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, thank you so much. I think that the live stream is gonna be kind of last for maybe 10 minutes. And then we will rate to EJ's fundraising stream for Socialist Rifle Association. Is that okay with you?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Whatever. Sorry,
That's good.
Yeah. So for the last 10 minutes, maybe give us your last thoughts, maybe start from Saber. Do you have any message or last thought?
Yeah, I'll have to say, first of all, I do feel like the kinds of networks that even we are forming right now on streams like this, as well as everyone that's in chat on Twitch and on YouTube and elsewhere, if you're streaming elsewhere. Now I feel like these are the kinds of things that we definitely need to be doing in terms of just trying to get away, just try to step away from these very corrosive ideas that are pervading society in many ways. And it's like like even just having conversations like this is very, very inspiring and stuff. So I really appreciate chatting with all of you. But yeah, in addition to that, I would say that to piggyback off what Silverpick was saying, right? There's a land back, right? Like there's so many different
land back
things. Yeah, just like based on all the various things that we've spoken about today. Like in order to generate the kinds of futures that we need to do, we definitely need to be doing what we can to decolonize the land. But in addition to that, just decolonizing our own minds and in short, making sure that we are not overlooking the whiteness that may be living inside of our own heads. That we need to constantly try to work that out, because a lot of us have grown up in this society, and since we've been born, been inundated with these kinds of ideas to try to push us away from ways of living that would actually allow us to be truly liberated. So I suppose that's my final thoughts, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I agree with you too, because I saw the same problem. Like a lot of Vietnamese, like Viet diaspora, even though they look like Vietnamese, they are Vietnamese in their blood. But like their mindset, because they were born in the West, live in the US, and then like of their information and their education, indoctrination are from the West. So actually the way they think things are really so much like white people. And I have to say, like, it is a very big problem. You have to deprogram yourself about that, and then have to look at things in our perspective. That's very important to like look at things in the indigenous people's perspective, and you will find many things like you would never think of before. Okay, now, Twin Rabbit. Twin Rabbit, what do you want to say to the audience?
Well, first of all, I'm really glad that everyone was here. I've enjoyed watching some of the comments that have popped through in the stream. As I've also enjoyed interacting with Tim and Silverspook and Saber. I don't think I've been on a panel with you before, so that's been really cool. I think as far as like the initial topic of the conversation and then where we went from there, one big issue that we need to interrogate for the next step is recognizing the contributions that were made by our various peoples and traditions into what initial Marxist and that ilk, what their thoughts were, and then continue forward from that point. So we're able to speak our truth still now, talking about our indigenous traditions, talking about our indigenous heritage, and that have a space in modern anarchist and socialist and communist conversations. Because I think we tend to focus too much on what these 19th century philosophers were saying and not really project forward into what we can do to utilize those concepts and apply them. So that's where a lot of my work focuses. So I try to keep those indigenous voices present and up to date. That's why I, especially on my Twitch, I spotlight like indigenous creators who are making video games, because I know a lot of people tend to not think of indigenous creators doing video games. Like Silverspook does fantastic work, but Silver's actually not the only one out there. And I don't think that gets as much play as it should. There should be more attention being focused on these indigenous creators and the difference that they add to the narrative by being from that experience and having those ideas already present in the way that they view the world. So
Totally
thank
agree
you,
with
everyone.
you.
It was a
Yes.
lot of fun, and I hope this conversation continues.
Yeah, I hope that too. I really hope that. Okay, Silverspook, what about you? What's your message?
Yeah, I've said a lot of things. I tend to do that on these streams, but I want to just thank everybody who came on. Again, it was like thanks for taking the time, and thanks Twin Rabbit again for spotlighting all of those. Some people were like, "Oh, this is just like dunking on Marx." That wasn't the point. It was just we want to acknowledge the contributions of indigenous peoples across the world.
Exactly.
It's about recognizing credit and not. It's about de-erasing, right? A lot of erased peoples and acknowledging contributions, because all these people have made contributions, and a very important thing that Marx contributed, which is dialectical thinking, and to do that, we have to acknowledge all of, and part of being dialectical is to go back and look at history in a light and be honest and look at our present reality and how, did all of our cultures impact it. So, I went pretty hard. Some people got like, I'm gonna say I don't like dislike, the United States people who live in that place. I do extremely dislike the fact that there is an ongoing illegal occupation of my country. I would think, a lot of things that are deeply wrong about the U.S. empire. They are, as I brought up, a variety of things, banning our language. It's illegal to speak Hawaiian still. Having this flag, technically this is all, America does not accept this, even though they even teach in their own bar exams for their own lawyers that Hawaii, literally, to practice law in Hawaii and pass the bar exam in the illegal state of Hawaii, you have to learn that the state of Hawaii does not exist under international law and even under federal law, because it has literally been argued in courts of law. People have won cases, like people have like won like $1 million court cases, literally arguing they are not citizens of the United States; they are citizens of the nation of Hawaii. So the United States, how does this even make sense? Or people are like, this is the undialecticalness of the entire U.S. empire, and I would argue every Western country. How does this even square where you can teach that Hawaii?
They even call it like land of the free. The land of the free, when it literally still has colonies.
Right? It's so, yeah, I argue the primary innovation, right, of the entire Western world is the ability to confidently say nonsense, right? Particularly to people like Luna Oy, particularly on Twitter, but in general, say nonsense about things they know nothing with absolute confidence, right? And just lie through your teeth because of ignorance or because of malice. And you know the truth, but you're lying. for your own personal benefit. And like that's what, you know, and so what, you know, that's just that's not like it's not written anywhere. It's just like a thing that has been perpetuated, and it's a part of the heart of colonialism, which is being dishonest about, like as Saber brought up, just burying all the bodies that you've killed and hiding it all, and then going, oh, you have a human rights violation, that means we have to invade your country, right? Whether that's the one America's trying to invade now, whether that's Iraq, whether that's the Nair testimony, again and again and again, right? So it's like projecting what you're doing on other people, saying that they're bad while you're doing 10,000 times worse things to everyone else. That's what I don't like. And that's why I spend a lot of time being incredibly upset, because as I said, I've worked for 3 different billionaires. I mean, one of them literally, he owns tech. I should air everybody's laundry out, but I went across the school from one of America's greatest war criminals. His name is President Obama. I only was able to go there because my father taught there, and he has said such horrific things. He has backed the U.S. empire that it continues to crush us, and he's not even white, and he's from Hawaii. And it just saddens me. I have my own family members that even participate in this structure, sometimes not because of their own accord, but like that's what we can't get to whatever your tendency, your socialist, anarchist, communist, whatever. We're never going to get to any of these better futures, not utopia, but just better future. We're never going to get there if we continue to, you know, that's what Neofeud, if it is anything in my work, my indigenous science fiction work, it's about being absolutely as honest as possible about the reality, right? Trying to be as dialectical as possible. Like, this is what Hawaii is. This is what capitalism is. This is what the racialized capitalism is. This is what it is. It's neo-feudalism. It's a guy sitting on a throne of $186 billion, right? And until and when I say we, some of these, I'm talking about people in the continent United States, a lot of people in Europe, settler colonies in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, until you can be dialectical and totally honest about everything about history, yourself, who you are, you know, we are going to have a very hard and probably very violent time trying to get to, you know, whatever better future that's not perfect, but just better, you know. That's why Vietnam is doing a lot better, because like, they don't have to tear down their statues, you know. They don't have to tear down Ho Chi Minh. Ho Chi Minh isn't sitting on a pile of dead bodies, unlike Jefferson, unlike every president, you know. That's the difference. Anyway, that's a lot. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, we just got raided by a Brazilian comrade. Nice. Hello, raiders. Okay, so listen to Silver Spook, Twin Rabbit, and Saber. This message, I really want to say, like, we Vietnamese too, we don't treat Marxism-Leninism as like Bible. We don't. We learn the basic knowledge of Marxism-Leninism. We learn dialectical materialism and historical materialism and scientific socialism. But the most important is we have to learn how to apply those theories into practice. It is very important. Like, we have to learn our material conditions and how to apply and how to apply the theory creatively. That's why we have a whole like Ho Chi Minh thought. Ho Chi Minh thought is just simply the way Vietnamese apply those theories into our real life. And again, from that, lots and lots of people saying like, I don't know, like, I mean, my point is, you cannot just copy every single thing that Vietnam did into your society, because you have a different material conditions, and you are the one who have to learn to analyze the conditions and then how to apply it. It's gonna be very different. There is no universal path towards socialism, toward communism. And we, the communists, or even like anarchists, you are the one who design how it's gonna look like in the future. And this is my like biggest critic to ultra-leftist people who like, they worship the book. And they think like communism and socialism is like a list of check box. And then you only can consider like socialist or communist if all the boxes are like being checked or something like that. It is very non-dialectical way of thinking, and it's gonna be very toxic too. Okay, thank you so much, everybody. The stream, I think it's time for the stream to end, because it's pretty late for our guests too. But don't worry if you're on Twitch. We gonna raid to EJ's, my partner stream. He's doing fundraising stream for socialist rifle Association. And the purpose of the fundraising is to like the storm season is coming, and the project is to get the donation to help people to prepare for maybe the future storm, future flood, or something like that. And I think it's very important for all of us to have our help on this. Wait a minute, where is it?
And thank you, Luna, for hosting.
Okay,
us.
here.
Yeah, thank.
Oh
Thanks,
yeah,
Fluffy.
thank
for
you so
hosting.
much for being here.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I hope that eventually in the near future we can bring back this panel.
Definitely.
Because of
Yeah,
course we
for
still
sure.
have many more things to talk about. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now I'm such a boomer. I clicked rate channel, right? And I choose non-compete. And then I will start rate.
Huzzah.
All right, bye everyone. Thanks everyone for being in chat as well.
Wow, my computer is so slow. It just doesn't do anything. Weird. Please rate. I don't know. Okay,
Wait, I
I
think
already
it's counting
clicked
down.
the button.
Yeah. I think it's.
Oh,
it's
Looks like you
really?
rated.
doing the countdown thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. We just have to wait.
Oh,
so here's
good.
that sort of intermission point where we just have to sort of pretend that we're being, oh yeah, let me just pretend to, yeah, whilst the
We have to
rate's
vamp
counting
now.
down. But yeah, no, I'm checking the chat. I'm
Okay.
seeing some familiar faces. So yeah, I see you all in chat. I see you. All right.
Yep.
Okay, good. So it's already rated, right?
Almost.
Well, rating.
Almost there. Give it like 20,
Yeah.
20 seconds. 20 seconds.
Weird. Okay. I'm such a boomer, and also
We need some
I'm
elevator music.
live
for times
streaming
like these,
from
that's
my-
what we need.
This is when
that
we're
was
supposed to
all.
sell windows or something, right?
Yeah.
Buy Neofeud. Buy Neofeud. That's what we
Neofeud,
need,
yes.
that's what we
Oh, also Umurangi generation. Oh, too late.
gotta do. All right. We're rated. Cool.
Great. All right.
There you go.
Oh, okay. We ended up because good. Hello, you. Bye, YouTube channel. People,
Oh,
bye
bye,
bye.
YouTube.
Love you all.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
And yeah, if you're YouTube, and you can go to Twitch, go to non-compete Twitch and to